The Rift's Call, Meiyu's Descent into the Unseen. Expanded Chapter 1, The Fractured Dream. The Garden of Stillness. Meiyu Soryun had always been told that silence was the key to clarity. The Garden of Stillness was meant to be the most peaceful place in all of Kaibara, a sacred floating sanctuary where reality remained stable, untouched by the shifts of perception that governed the rest of the city. The elders claimed that here, the mind could rest, and truth could be found. But tonight, Meiyu knew better. Tonight, she felt the rift watching her, even in this place. She sat cross-legged on a levitating meditation stone, her breath slow and controlled. The air was thick with the scent of sapphire lotus, a flower known to open the mind. Its petals shimmered in the faint glow of Caeruleus God-glow, growing in pools of liquid energy beneath her. The gentle hum of the God-glow streams resonated within her bones, a pulse that reminded her that reality itself was shaped by thought. But her thoughts were unraveling. She could still hear the whispers from her vision, the echo of the rift speaking her name. Meiyu Soryun. The way it had said her name not as a question, but as a statement, as if it had already known her, as if it had been waiting for her to listen. She took a slow breath, centering herself, but the weight of the knowledge she now carried pressed against her chest. The rift is not gone. It is inside me now. The realization made her feel as if she were standing at the edge of an unseen precipice, staring into something infinite, something that had no end. For the first time in her life, Meiyu felt truly alone. A mind unraveling. Meiyu had trained for years under the ethereal scholars, mastering the discipline of dream-walking and mind-weaving. She had been taught to separate vision from illusion, to read the strands of fate that flowed through the ever-shifting reality of Soryo. But none of her training had prepared her for this. Her connection to the rift had changed something within her. A door had opened, and she could no longer close it. She could feel it now. The way the world shifted around her, the way reality breathed, pulsing faintly, as if it were alive. She closed her eyes and let her mind drift, searching for the stillness that had always come so easily to her before. But this time, the stillness did not come. Instead, the world trembled. And then, it shattered. The fractured city. Meiyu's eyes flew open. She was no longer in the Garden of Stillness. She stood in the heart of Kaibara, but it was not the city she knew. The floating streets were warped, bending at impossible angles, the bridges between islands stretching and twisting as if struggling to decide where they should lead. The spires of the Saiku Council's palace flickered, their grand halls fading in and out of existence, as if they were caught between two competing realities. Meiyu's breath caught as she saw figures moving through the streets, shadows of people, their forms blurred, their faces unrecognizable. But she knew them. Her mind recognized their presence, even if their names had been stripped from her memory. They were the erased, fragments of Kaibara's past that should not exist. I am seeing the city as it was before. The rift was not just showing her a vision. It was showing her a forgotten reality. She turned, and her gaze fell upon a grand archway that had never existed in her waking world. It was massive, carved from shimmering Caeruleus-infused stone, its entrance a swirling void of shifting blue light. She should not have recognized it, but she did. The Gate of Unwritten Truths. It was a name that had never been spoken aloud, yet it resided within her as if she had always known it. It was a gate to the past, a door that led to the truth of what Soryo had been before the Saiku Council had rewritten it. Meiyu felt something pulling at her consciousness, urging her to step forward, to cross through the threshold of the gate. But then, the whispers began, the unseen voices. At first, they were soft, the murmurs of unseen figures, speaking in tongues long lost to time. Then, the voices rose, overlapping, layering upon each other, a symphony of memory and regret. We are the unseen. We are the erased. We are the ones who once were. Meiyu clutched her head as the voices pressed against her mind, their presence overwhelming, as if they were trying to pour themselves into her, to make her remember. She staggered back, breathless. Who are you? A pause. Then a single voice, stronger than the rest, spoke through the void. You hear us, Meiyu Soryun. She turned, and before her stood a figure cloaked in sapphire and gold, their face hidden behind a veil of shifting light. She could not tell if they were man or woman, young or old. Their presence was timeless, infinite, as if they were not a single being, but a collection of many, bound together in the rift. You are the first to listen in centuries. Meiyu's breath trembled. Who are you? The figure lifted a hand, gesturing toward the fractured sky, where the pieces of reality hung like shards of a broken mirror. We are the first. We were the ones who shaped the skies, who wove thought into the foundation of this world. Meiyu's heart pounded. You mean the Saiku Council? The figure turned toward her, and for the first time, she saw their face shifting, their features morphing, as if they were caught between different identities, as if they had been many people, all erased from history. No. The council did not create this world, they stole it. The air around her cracked as they spoke, the weight of their words reshaping the dream itself. The rift does not destroy, it remembers. And soon, Meiyu Soryun, so shall you. Chapter 2. The Unraveling City. A city warped by thought. The moment Meiyu stepped through the gate of unwritten truths, she knew she had left Kaibara as she had always known it. Her feet touched solid ground, yet the sensation was strange, distant, as if the reality beneath her was still deciding whether it should exist. She stood at the center of a Kaibara that had been forgotten, a city that should not exist. The streets stretched before her, lined with towering spires of ceruleus-infused stone, pulsing faintly with psychic energy. The bridges between floating islands were no longer twisting and breaking, but fully formed, grand and shimmering like woven silk. This was not a dream. This was a past that had been erased. The people moved like shadows of memory, their forms flickering in and out of existence. Some walked with purpose, speaking in voices Meiyu could almost recognize, their words hovering at the edges of her understanding. Yet none of them saw her. None of them acknowledged her presence. She was walking through history itself, unseen and unheard, as if she were merely a ghost in a world that had once been real. Her heart pounded in her chest. This city, it was never destroyed. It was rewritten. And yet, even as she witnessed this forgotten version of Kaibara, she could feel it. The city was resisting her presence. The air shuddered, warping at the edges of her vision, as if reality itself was trying to push her out. I shouldn't be here. She took a step forward, forcing herself to breathe steadily. She needed to understand this place before it collapsed around her. But then, the whispers returned. The echo of the rift. Meiyu Soryun. She froze. It was not just one voice this time. It was many, layered upon one another, speaking her name in perfect unison. You have crossed into the unwritten. The air around her darkened, and for the first time since she had entered the rift's memory, the people stopped moving. They turned, all of them. Their faces, once blurred, became clearer, their eyes glowing with the faint blue hue of ceruleus godglow. And then, as one, they spoke. You do not belong here. A pressure unlike anything she had ever felt clamped down on her mind. It was not an attack. It was a command. Reality itself was trying to reject her presence, pushing against her thoughts, demanding that she forget. Meiyu fought back. No. The force against her mind wavered. The figures tilted their heads in unison, studying her, their expressions unreadable. Then, a single figure stepped forward. A woman, tall, draped in robes of deep sapphire, her hair bound in an elaborate coil adorned with silver threads that pulsed with psychic energy. Her face was calm, yet ancient. "You hear the rift's voice," the woman said, her presence heavier than the others. "You are unbound by the rewritten past." Meiyu felt the weight of those words settle deep into her bones. Unbound. She was not just seeing the forgotten city. She was existing in it without being rewritten. The realization sent a chill through her. The council does not know about this. Had they ever seen this place? Had they ever stepped through the rift themselves? Or had they always been too afraid of what they might find? She swallowed hard and met the woman's gaze. "Tell me, what is this place?" The woman's eyes flickered, something ancient stirring behind them. "This is the first Kaibara. The city before the Saiku Council. The city they erased. The city before the rewriting." Meiyu tried to grasp the enormity of what she was seeing. The first Kaibara? A version of the city older than history itself? She forced herself to ask the next question. "Who are you?" The woman was silent for a long moment. Then she lifted a hand, gesturing to the still frozen figures around them. "We are the last echoes of the first council, the true mind-weavers, the ones who first bound Carulius Godglow to reality. Before the Saiku Council took control, we were the ones who shaped this world. But we were silenced. We were rewritten." Meiyu's breath hitched. If what she was hearing was true, then the Saiku Council did not create Soryo's reality. They stole it. The woman stepped closer, her voice lowering, as if she were sharing a secret never meant to be heard. "They feared the knowledge we carried. They took our city, our minds, our past, and they buried it within the rift." Chapter 2. End. To be continued. Meiyu now stood at the heart of a forgotten past, faced with a truth that could shatter everything she had ever believed. But if the first Kaibara still existed in the rift, then what else had the Saiku Council erased? And what would happen if this past ever broke free? Chapter 3. The Voices of the Forgotten. A city that should not be Meiyu Soryun had always trusted her visions. Until now. The first Kaibara, the city before the rewriting, should not exist. Yet here it stood. She walked its streets, feeling the weight of time pressing against her mind, as if reality itself was resisting her presence. The people, or echoes of people, moved around her, their forms flickering between substance and shadow. Their faces, indistinct at first, were slowly becoming clearer. And then they stopped. All of them. Every figure in the city turned to face her, their eyes glowing with the faint blue hue of Carulius Godglow. Meiyu's breath hitched. Then, in perfect unison, they spoke. "You do not belong here." The weight of the rift, Meiyu felt it immediately, a force pressing into her skull, not a physical weight, but a psychic command. A voice that was not a single voice, but many, layered upon each other, pressing against the walls of her mind. A demand, a command to forget, to leave, to erase this knowledge before it could spread. Meiyu fought back. She braced her mind, calling upon her training, forcing herself to hold her own perception steady. No. The force wavered, as if surprised. The figures stood motionless, their faces shifting, flickering between identities. Then, one of them stepped forward. A woman, draped in sapphire robes, her presence more solid than the rest. Her hair was bound in intricate silver coils, the metal glinting like woven threads of thought. And her eyes did not glow like the others. They were sharp, aware, watching. This was no mere echo. This was someone who remembered. "You hear the rift's voice," the woman said. "You are unbound by the rewritten past." A truth that cannot be known. Meiyu's breath caught in her throat. Unbound? The word sent a cold chill through her. If she was unbound, then that meant the rift could no longer erase her. She was not just seeing the forgotten city, she was existing within it, unaffected by the rewriting of history. The woman studied her, as if measuring her worth. Then, she lifted a hand, gesturing toward the still frozen figures around them. They do not remember themselves. Meiyu's pulse quickened. Who are they? The woman's expression remained unreadable. They were once the rulers of this world. Before the Saiku Council took control, we were the ones who shaped Soryo's reality. We were the first to bind Carulius Godglow to thought. Meiyu's breath hitched. The first? She had been taught that the Saiku Council were the ones who had discovered the truth of perception, the first to wield psychic energy to shape reality itself. But if these people had come before them, then that meant the Council had not been the creators of this world. They had been the conquerors of it. She swallowed hard. The Council erased you. The woman's gaze did not waver. They rewrote the past to make themselves the beginning of history. Meiyu felt her chest tighten. She had always questioned the Council, had always felt the weight of unspoken truths hidden beneath layers of perception. But this was something far worse than she had ever imagined. She looked around at the city, the elegant bridges, the towering spires, a civilization more advanced than anything she had seen in Kaibara, and it had all been buried, rewritten. And then, the woman spoke again. The rift is all that remains of us. We are its memory. And now, Meiyu Soryun, so are you. The rift's mark. The air shifted. The ground beneath her feet trembled. The city was beginning to collapse. Meiyu's vision blurred as the world fractured, the figures around her fading as the rift began to reject her presence. She felt a hand on her wrist, the woman's grip, firm, anchoring her to this place. If you leave now, you will forget. The pressure on her mind intensified, the weight of the rift forcing itself upon her thoughts. Her mind screamed against it. She felt the urge to let go, to let the rift erase her memories, to let this truth slip into nothingness. But she refused. No. She clutched the woman's hand, forcing herself to hold on to the reality around her. I will remember. A beat of silence. Then the woman smiled, a small, knowing smile. Then you are truly unbound. The rift shuddered, and Meiyu was pulled backward, torn from the city as it collapsed into nothingness. Meiyu awoke with a gasp in the real Kaibara, the vision seared into her mind. She had seen the truth, and now she had a choice. Would she hide this knowledge, knowing the Council would hunt her if they discovered what she had learned? Or would she seek out the lost past, no matter the cost? The rift had marked her, and it was not done with her yet. Chapter 4. The Truth of the Rift. The Awakening. Meiyu gasped awake, her lungs desperate for air. She was no longer in the first Kaibara. She was no longer in the fractured city of the forgotten. She was back in the Garden of Stillness, her body trembling, sweat dripping down her skin like the last remnants of a dream refusing to fade. But this was not a dream. She could still feel the pressure of the rift, like invisible threads woven into her mind, binding her to something far greater than herself. It had changed her. She knew things now, things she should not know. She sat up slowly, the scent of sapphire lotus thick in the air, the distant hum of Carulius Godglow pools still steady beneath her. The floating lanterns of the garden still flickered softly in the night. Everything appeared unchanged. And yet, everything was different. A mind that cannot forget. She pressed her fingers against her temple, trying to steady her thoughts. But they came in waves, visions, memories, fragments of a history that had been buried beneath the fabric of reality itself. She saw the first Kaibara, its spires stretching into a sky that had not yet been touched by the rewriting of history. She saw the people who had once ruled this land, their minds so powerful that they had no need for words, shaping the world through thought alone. And she saw the Saiku Council, not as the wise guardians they claimed to be, but as usurpers. The council had not created Soryo's mastery over thought and perception. They had taken it. They had rewritten reality itself. They had buried an entire civilization within the rift, erasing it from existence. Meiyu's breath shuddered. How much of our history is a lie? She clutched at the front of her robes, trying to steady herself. Her thoughts felt too vast, as if the weight of knowledge itself threatened to pull her apart. She had always been taught that memory was malleable, that perception could be altered, that what people believed shaped the truth. But now, she knew, there was something deeper than perception. There was a truth that could not be rewritten. And she had found it. Or rather, it had found her. The rift's mark. A sharp pulse of energy shocked through her mind, making her inhale sharply. She pressed a hand to her forehead. Something was still there. Not just the knowledge, but the rift itself. It had not simply shown her the past. It had touched her, woven itself into the very fabric of her mind. She could feel it, like a second presence, like a whisper at the edges of her thoughts, a mark, an anchor. I am no longer just a seer of visions. I am connected to the rift itself. Her fingers curled into a fist. The council would sense it. They would know that something had changed, and if they realized what she had seen, they would erase her, like they had erased everything before. The warning. She had to move. She had to think. She needed to decide what to do with this knowledge before it was too late. But as she stood on unsteady legs, she felt a presence approaching, a ripple in the air, not someone walking through the garden, but a mind pressing against hers, a psychic probe. Someone was searching for her. She clenched her jaw, bracing herself, pulling her thoughts inward, shielding what she had learned. Then, a voice, cold, controlled, familiar. Meiyu. She turned. Renshiro. Her elder brother stood at the edge of the garden, clad in the deep indigo and gold of the Thoughtblade Order, his mind like a fortress, unreadable. His silver eyes were sharp, piercing, watching, judging. He stepped forward, slow, deliberate. I felt something, a disturbance in the god-glow, a shift in perception itself. She forced herself to stand straight, to meet his gaze without faltering. I don't know what you mean. A lie. And she knew immediately. He could feel it. His expression did not change, but she saw the way his fingers curled slightly at his sides, the way his breath slowed, the way his presence pressed against hers just a little harder. He was testing her, reading her. Are you certain? His voice was calm, but there was something beneath it. A warning, a demand. Meiyu's heart pounded in her chest, but she did not let it show. He cannot know. Not yet. I was meditating, she said smoothly. Perhaps you simply mistook it for something greater. She could feel his thoughts brushing against her mental defenses, searching for cracks, for weakness. She held firm. She had never hidden anything from him before, and now, for the first time, she did. After a long moment, Renshiro exhaled softly, his psychic pressure retreating. If you sense anything unnatural, he said, his voice even, you will tell me, won't you? Meiyu smiled. Another lie. Of course, brother. The path of no return Renshiro left soon after, but Meiyu knew this was not the end. She had seen too much. She had felt the rift's touch. The knowledge inside her was a curse as much as it was a gift. She could try to bury it, to forget, to pretend that the world was exactly as the Saiku Council wanted her to believe. Or she could step deeper into the truth. She could find others who had begun to question reality. She could seek out the Veil-born rebellion. She could unravel the Council's lies once and for all. The wind stirred through the garden, rustling the petals of the floating sky lotus trees. The choice was already made. Meiyu turned, walking toward the edge of the garden, toward the city, toward her future. If they have rewritten the past, then I will be the one to bring it back. Chapter 5. The Veilborn Rebellion. A Name Written in Shadows. Meiyu moved through the winding streets of Kaibara with a mind sharpened like a blade. She was being watched. Not by the council, not yet, but by someone else. Someone who had seen the way she hesitated, the way her gaze lingered too long on the ceruleous God-glow-infused walls of the ethereal archives, the way she had spoken carefully when her brother asked about the disturbance. Someone who knew she had begun to question the world as it was presented to her. The Veilborn were listening, and tonight she would make them speak. The secret market Kaibara was a city built on thought and perception, and nowhere was that clearer than in the lower districts, where truths lived between words and secrets were as common as the air itself. Here, past the grand bridges that led to the Saiku Council's halls, beyond the floating gardens where nobles meditated, lay the market of unspoken names. A place where those who had been forgotten by history still whispered their truths in the shadows. Meiyu had never dared to step foot here before, but now she had no choice. The market was a place of shifting stalls, built not on land, but on platforms suspended in mid-air, held together by thin threads of psychic energy. Vendors sold artifacts of uncertain origin, books that had been erased from history, God-glow-infused relics that pulsed with memories that no longer belonged to the world. And at the very center of it all was the Lotus Pavilion, a floating tea-house that did not exist unless you knew where to look. A place where rebels gathered, where the Veilborn whispered of truths too dangerous to be known. Meiyu stepped onto the pavilion's threshold, and the world shifted. The air grew heavier, laced with unseen thoughts. The entrance shimmered, and then it was there, fully formed. She stepped inside, and she was not alone. The Veilborn leader. The tea-house was silent, save for the soft hum of mind-forged lanterns, their light flickering as if responding to the thoughts of those inside. And at the far end of the room sat a man draped in shadow, his presence like a ripple in still water. Saeiji Katsuro, the leader of the Veilborn Rebellion. His face was calm, unreadable, his eyes deep pools of indigo godglow, not natural, but altered. A mark of someone who had been exposed to the rift and survived. He regarded her with curiosity, as if already knowing why she was here. Meiyu Soryun, he said, his voice like silk woven with steel. She did not react, though his knowledge of her name unsettled her. You know who I am, she said, keeping her voice steady. A small smirk. Of course. You have been walking the edge of truth for a long time. It was only a matter of when, not if, you would step beyond it. She crossed her arms. Then you also know what I've seen. His eyes glinted. The first Kaibara, the city before the rewriting, the truth that the council buried. Meiyu's breath caught. He knew. He had seen it too. How? She asked. His smirk faded. Because I was not always a rebel, Meiyu. Once I was a scholar of the council like you. She stiffened. If that was true, then... They tried to erase you. A slow nod. They erased many of us, he said. But some of us remember. A dangerous truth. Meiyu sat across from him, her hands resting on the polished wooden table. A servant placed a pot of sapphire lotus tea before them, a rare brew that sharpened the mind, often used in deep meditations and visions. She did not drink. She only stared at the man before her. The rift showed me the past, she said, her voice low. It showed me what the council has done. But I don't know what to do with it. Saiji studied her for a long moment before answering. You are at the crossroads where all of us have stood, he said. You have two choices. He raised one hand. Forget. Let the council's rewriting take hold. Bury what you know and continue the life that has been chosen for you. Then he raised the other. Or, embrace the truth. step beyond the veil of lies, and fight for what was lost. Meiyu's fingers curled into a fist. If I fight, what happens to me? Saeji leaned forward, his expression unreadable. You will no longer belong to this world as it is, he said. You will become something else, someone who does not exist in the Council's reality. You mean I will be erased? No. He shook his head. You will be unwritten. The test silence stretched between them. Meiyu felt the weight of the rift's presence within her mind, the knowledge she carried pressing against her very being. She had already made her decision before she walked into this place. I want to know everything, she said. Saeji's lips curled into something between a smile and a warning. Then let me show you the first step. He reached into his sleeve and withdrew a small, polished crystal, pulsing faintly with Caruleus energy. This is a memory, he said, placing it on the table between them. Meiyu's breath hitched. Memory-forged crystals were forbidden artifacts, capable of storing thoughts, emotions, even entire lifetimes. It was the kind of knowledge the Council feared most. The Council destroyed all records of the first Kaibara, he continued. But some of us, we preserved what we could. He pushed the crystal toward her. Take it. See for yourself what was lost. Meiyu hesitated. She knew the risk. If she touched this crystal, there would be no turning back. She would no longer be someone merely questioning reality. She would be someone who had seen the truth too clearly to ever forget it. Her fingers hovered over the crystal. Her heart pounded. And then, she touched it. Chapter 5. End. To be continued. Meiyu has taken the first step into rebellion. Now she will witness a memory of the true past, a past the Council erased from existence. But will the truth set her free, or consume her?